Welcome to the Behind the Bar podcast. Today we're talking with Sean from Brid's Brewery. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, thanks for having me on. I'm Sean, and I'm the owner, head brewer, drayman, general dog's body at Brewing, which is a new brewery, 1 year old, based in Rochdale.
Oh, nice. And if you kind of explain the thought process behind your brewery?
Okay, so the thought process was wanting to have a bit of a career change. So a 25-year career as a primary school teacher, and in a post-COVID world decided that I wanted to try something different. So the brewery itself is named after the cross of St Bridget, who's the patron saint of brewers and storytellers, and all of our beers are based on folk tales and mythology and this sort of thing. And storytelling is another sort of passion of mine, as well as brewing. So it seemed like a perfect kind of bringing together of a couple of different worlds.
How did the idea, obviously that's the thought process behind it, but how did it fully spark coming up with making drinks based on mythology?
So I guess originally I had first thought about a career change in 2019, and very nearly bought a pub in 2019 with the idea of it being a brew pub, having been home brewing for quite a few years before that as well. So yes, very nearly bought a brew pub in 2019, and for various reasons decided not to, and then breathed an enormous sigh of relief in 2020 because that was a bullet dodged. And then it was in December of 2021, having a conversation with my middle child. And it was one of those conversations of, Dad, you're a good brewer, you should do this, you should try doing something different. And decided, what I said, I can't do that because I'd need some capital to get started. And actually I had separated from my wife and sold a family home and had a lot of money in the bank at the time, and it suddenly occurred to me that I didn't have to buy a house. I could try setting up a brewery instead. So talked to the children, explained that this could be a very good way of blowing their inheritance. They said go for it, and so I started thinking, in early 2022, I suppose, about whether I could actually set up the brewery. And then it was a case, I suppose, of thinking about what would be the brand identity. And that's where I sort of went back to my past in storytelling. So another attempted career change a number of years ago had been to try to become a professional storyteller. I'm doing a better job of being a professional brewer than I did of being a professional storyteller. But yeah, just going back to that previous interest and seeing that this was something that potentially would be an interesting point of difference with the brewery, because obviously there's an awful lot of small breweries around in the world. So it was just trying to find something that would make my brewery a little bit different, a little bit unique, and a selling point.
Yes, and was it a conscious decision to stay with the British Isles kind of folklore, or did you think about going more into different countries' mythology? It's
sort of a conscious thing in terms of it's my heritage, and not feeling entirely comfortable about taking folklore from other cultures. I feel that's not my place. So it's it's rooted in in British folklore, because that's my culture and my heritage, and I feel that that's the sort of authentic thing to do. There's a slight looseness to it. So one of the stories is actually Viking in its origin, but they came and settled here, so that's part of our culture too. But yeah, just wanting something that was authentically like my culture, I think. Yeah,
that's really nice. Within that, what is your favourite story for the mythologies? Whether it be one that you've already done or one that you hope to maybe do in the future?
So I think it's difficult because I love them all, but the one that I think that we've done already that I guess is perhaps my favourite is the first beer that we commercially released was called Ash and Elm, which is the Viking story, and it's actually the Viking equivalent of the story of Adam and Eve, essentially. Odin created the first man and first woman from an ash tree and an elm tree, hence the name of the beer, Ash and Elm. So that was our first commercial release, and it's our biggest seller to date. And the other thing about it that's interesting is actually when it came out, I don't actually have any cans in stock, unfortunately, so I can't show you the artwork, but there's a man and a woman on the can and on the pump clip, and people said to us, oh, is that you and Ruth, my partner, graphic designer and all-round supporter. And we said, no, it's just a man and a woman because it's the story, and people kept saying it. And after a while, we spoke to our artist and said, "Look, Matt, people keep saying, is it me and Ruth?" And he then turned around and said, "Well, actually, it kind of is."
So he based it off of
yeah.
you.
So he said, like, obviously it's a sort of Viking era man and woman, but he said he'd kind of looked at us and wanted it to kind of represent us as well.
That's really cute.
So it's quite personal.
It's like what's the word, like put into stone in a way, but obviously a beer can. What is one that you have just yet to figure out how to make the right mix for, but you really want to do it?
I don't know about that. There's loads of stories sort of in the back of my mind. Ruth is desperate for us to do something involving a dragon or a banshee. That's sort of top of her wish list. And I haven't quite found the right story for either of those yet. But the one that I'm really interested in at the moment, and I think I've got the idea. I was listening to a folklore podcast recently, and there was one of the guests was talking about a story of a grey lady at Delaprey Abbey in Northamptonshire, which was actually where Ruth and I had one of our first dates when it was sort of a long distance relationship. And so there's a personal connection with Delaprey Abbey. There's the Grey Lady, a good story. And apparently also Northamptonshire has a historic tradition of something called a treacle beer. And as a home brewer, I did a treacle stout. Yeah. So I've got the recipe idea. It links with Northamptonshire. It's a personal connection with Delaprey Abbey for us. So that's one that I will be thinking about and hopefully getting around to brewing relatively soon.
That sounds kind of exciting and sounds delicious, actually. You talk about the mixing of like the ingredients and stuff. How do you actually do that? Like, how do you come up with the ingredients for a ale or a stout or anything like that?
So I suppose ultimately it's it's barley, water, yeast, hops. It's it's straightforward. Sometimes the beer style and the story is really obvious. Like the treacle stout to go with Northamptonshire and the Grey Lady. There's a really obvious connection. Yeah. Sometimes it's a little bit less obvious. One that I could talk about is Andraste's Hare, which we've got in front of us here somewhere, which was originally brewed for International Women's Day. That's the one there, yeah. So we originally brewed that for International Women's Day, and that beer was designed by Ruth. So she talked about what she wanted the beer to taste like, and so I sort of sat down and thought about what hop combinations would give the right flavour profile. And then Ruth also chose the story. So the figure on the front is Boudica, Celtic warrior queen. Andraste was a Celtic goddess, and the hare was sacred to Andraste. And so before the first battle, Andraste released a hare onto the battlefield, and they were able to divine by the way the hare ran across the battlefield that the Celts were going to be victorious in battle, as indeed they were. So that's for that, the inspiration came from Ruth. The flavour she wanted, dictated the hops that I was using, and she had the story that fitted with the theme of it being an International Women's Day beer. So it kind of came together like that. So different beers come together in different ways, I suppose, but that's an example. Yeah.
And because this is, like you say, you've started it a year ago, how did you go about starting the business? So you said you were like blowing the inheritance, but What was the actual process like, and what kind of things would, I guess, advice for anyone that wanted to as well?
Okay. So in terms of advice, do as much research as you can, which is something that I did. I was fortunate to know quite a few people in the brewing industry, so I was able to get lots of good advice and information. Think about how long you expect it to take and then multiply that by about 2 or 3 times.
Yep.
Be prepared for the fact that no matter how many hurdles you know you're going to face, there's going to be at least 2 or 3 that nobody else has come across, because that's the way that it is. And be prepared for those. I say the brewery is a year old because that's kind of based on when we had our first commercial release, but I was working towards setting the brewery up really from early 2022. The business was incorporated as a business in October of 2022. We didn't start brewing until well into 2023, and it wasn't until the end of August that the first beer came out. So it's a long process. As I said, I thought I was quite well prepared, but it was longer than I thought.
Things always change as you try and go down the line in the cycle.
And then it was, I guess, the biggest cost to date in many ways has been the time that I've spent working on setting up a business, and the fact that initially you don't earn anything, and that that's an interesting conversation. I do a little bit of supply teaching now and again, and having a conversation in the staff room and about what I was doing, and I think, well, so who pays you for running the brewery as well? Nobody pays me. I have to sell enough beer for the brewery to have enough money for me to be able to take money out of it. So for people that have not had any background in running a business, that's a really alien concept, and that was quite scary for me, giving up a full-time, well-paid career
for a chance. Really.
Yeah. But I guess ultimately it was a case of I'd rather try it, and if it doesn't work, know that I've given it my best shot, than kind of get to being an old man and saying, oh, if only I'd have given it a try, what might have happened.
And you always have the products that just stay with you, and you did this is the thing that I put my soul into. Yes,
absolutely. And if nothing else, I feel I can hold my head up high knowing that I produced some really good beer that lots of people have really enjoyed and appreciated.
Yeah, and I mean, you say about working really long hours, and how do you maintain, or do you maintain, a work-life balance?
That's a tricky one. I mean, as a primary school teacher, and lots of people think primary school teachers are sort of 9 till 3 and long holidays and all the rest of it, and it isn't like that. So I'm used to working long hours. Obviously, setting up a business, there's an awful lot of hard work, and at the end of the day, if myself or Ruth doesn't do something, it doesn't happen, and the business doesn't go anywhere. So we spend a lot of time, and I would hope that as we continue to grow, that might be something that we can slightly ease back on some of the things that we do. In terms of work-life balance, a lot of the work is something that I really enjoy anyway, and that helps. So before trying to set up a brewery, I was a home brewer, so I would look forward to having a day off so I could brew some beer. I get to do that as my job now. Also, Ruth and I, we enjoy going for a pint in the pub. It just so happens that I can do that, and that's work. So that there's elements. Absolutely, and sales, and so there's elements of the job that are really, really enjoyable. Clearly, there's also elements of the job that are a hard slog. So we try to make sure that that we take some time off, so that we can spend time doing stuff that's got nothing to do with the brewery whatsoever. And also being my own boss, it means I've got that flexibility to to be able to organise my work so that there's time to do stuff that I need to do for me as well, and for us.
But then when you're your own boss, you can just keep going until.
Absolutely.
Is it hard to keep that mindset of no, I need to slow down sometimes?
It can be. There's sometimes there's weeks where I get to the end of the week and think, actually, I've just worked really full on this week. And so then when that happens, then okay, look, this next week I've got to make sure that I make some time, because yes, it is a challenge striking the balance, and we don't always get it right. But I'm certainly, I'm a year into it, and I'm enjoying what I do. And occasionally there's days where I had a 14-hour day in the brewery a couple of weeks ago, and at the end of that I was absolutely shattered and
I can imagine.
really fed up, and so there are days like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I turned the alarm off for the next day, and I just right, okay, I need to rest.
Yeah.
So it's just realizing that there are some days or weeks where I have to work harder, and then when that's happened, then I need to pay that back to myself afterwards.
What is the thing that keeps you the most motivated with it? Because obviously if you have like those hard days, those hard weeks, what is the one thing, or there might be multiple things, that is like, no, I really love this, other than just loving the business, do you think?
It is just, it's a very sociable industry to be in. So that really helps. Getting good feedback from people. I mean, I'm absolutely still at the stage of just going into the pub and seeing my beer on the bar is just a big kick. But getting, whether it's like people that have ordered cans from the website and then posting something on social media saying how much they've enjoyed the beer, that's fantastic. The other day I was doing a delivery at a pub in town, and as I was walking to the pub, there was a guy that was just, I don't know him, never seen him before in my life, but he obviously saw the brewery branding on my hoodie, and he was just out of the blue, oh, I love your Ash and Elm beer. I was like, oh, wow, that's that kind of thing. Obviously lifts the spirits enormously, getting that positive feedback from people.
Yeah, especially from strangers.
That absolutely.
You don't know. You know that they're not like mincing their words.
No.
They're not trying to just please you. It's their true thoughts.
He had absolutely no reason to say anything to me whatsoever. It would be the easiest thing in the world for him to just walk by and ignore me. But he wanted to make that effort to say something.
I love when people do that.
Absolutely.
And you talk about like how much you enjoy seeing the permanent taps in the pub. How, because that's a hard thing to do, especially competing with the other massive brands that have those taps. How did you go about getting them in those pubs? So I know you have like two.
Yeah, so we've got two permanent lines, which for a new brewery, just a year old, having two permanent lines is amazing. The first one was very fortuitous. It was one of those days where we were just having a day off and going for a walk in the countryside, and after we'd had the walk, thinking, oh, let's have a pint before we go home, and pop into a local pub, which we'd never been into before. Realised that they had that they were a free of Thai pub, and just got chatting to the cellar manager initially, which then led to a conversation with the owner. And that then led to an order. So there you go, mixing business and pleasure. They took a couple of casks, and they took the keg version of Ash and Elm. And the first keg sold out in just a little over 24 hours, I think.
Wow.
So they kind of like phoned me back, can we have some more? Yeah, sure. So, and in the next keg, I think maybe took about 3 days to sell out, but from there it was just, well, as long as people keep drinking it and you keep making it, we're going to keep that on the bar, because obviously people are really enjoying it. So that was just really fortuitous. It was a pub that I didn't know. I hadn't gone there on purpose to sell beer. It just happened. So that's just very lucky. The other permanent line is a rotating cask line at the Baum in Rochdale, which is, I think, maybe my favourite pub in town. Although there's a lot of good pubs in Rochdale to choose from. But Ben, the GM at the Baum, had bought beer from us quite often. Over our first sort of 6 months or so, and we'd started some conversations, some sort of initial conversations about having a tap takeover event to celebrate our first birthday. So we were having those conversations, and then I produced a beer called Baum Rabbit, which is named after a local legend of that part of Rochdale, and the pub is called the Bourne because that's the name of the area of Rochdale, and the rabbit is from there. So it's a great tie-in. In fact, when I delivered it, I was asked if the guy behind the bar said, "Did Ben ask you to make this beer?" No. It was my idea to make the beer, but I sort of just half jokingly said it would make a good house beer, wouldn't it? And yeah, so those sort of conversations that were going on, and it's just having that relationship. And in one of those conversations, Ben turned around to me and said, "Look, Sean, how would you feel about having a permanent line?" And I was like, "How would I feel? I could live with it, Of course, I'd love to have a permanent line."
The really big thing that most brewers really, really want. Yes, you will have that.
Yeah. So so that's I've been a rotating cask line, so it's often Bourne Rabbit, but it changes with other beers as well.
You said that you were working on the brew with your partner Ruth. How do you find working so closely with the person you share your life with?
It's interesting. So, I mean, Ruth has a full-time job and she works around her full-time job. She's actually changed her hours. She's got some flexible working arrangements with work, so she's changed her hours to free up time to be able to do brewery work for me. But she's, there's a lot of the time that she's at her day job. And obviously I'm the one in the brewery, brewing, packaging, making delivery runs, all of these sorts of things. So there's a large part of the working day and the working week where we're doing our own separate things. And then coming together, and evenings we try and not be talking about the brewery all of the time. But there's weekends we sell beer in cans on markets, so weekend markets we're working together. So there's a lot of time that we are working together, but then we try and find time where we kind of put that to one side and just concentrate on just having some sort of us time. As I said, we don't always succeed in that because sometimes brewery stuff just pops up. But we try and make time that's just for us.
And with the overall just everything, where do you see yourself? It's a horrible question, I know, but in the next 5 years, what's your goals for the brewery?
I'd like to think that as we continue to grow sales, that by the time we get to sort of 5 years from now, I'd be in a position where I had sort of one or two people working for me. In particular, somebody as a production brewer would be enormously helpful, because working in a small brewery is a very physical and manual job, and I'm not the youngest. So it would be nice at some point to have somebody that can share that physical side of the job. And then it's a question of looking at what other skill sets people could bring in to the business, whether that's somebody doing deliveries or somebody working more on sales. So I'd like to see growing to being a small team. It's not my ambition to become one of the kind of giants of the craft beer world. But I'd like it to be a small team, beyond just myself and Ruth.
And you once had the dream of owning a pub. Would you ever, once the brewery takes off even more, would you ever think about having a little pub of your own?
Yeah, I would very much. The idea of having a, whether it's a tap room or a small pub, is something I'd very much like to do. Obviously, for one thing, selling direct to consumer means that the margins are that much better. Clearly it also comes with more overheads and responsibilities, so it swings and roundabouts. But it's definitely something that I would like to have. I think with the nature of the brewery and the brand, it doesn't really lend itself to the archetypal kind of railway arch or industrial estate brewery tap room. That kind of wouldn't really quite feel right for this brewery. So maybe it would need to be, a country pub or something like that to sort of fit with the brand. But it would be nice to have a a home, a pub that was the home of the brewery. Yeah.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and talking about Breed's Cross Brewery. And is there anything you would like to promote or push out there while you have the chance?
Oh well, no, thanks for having me on. It's always a pleasure to talk about beer and brewing and the brewery. Obviously, any pub that's interested in knowing more about us, look out for us on our website or our social media. We mainly sell in the Greater Manchester and Northwest area, but we've had beer that's gone as far afield as Newcastle, East Anglia, London. So always looking for more people to enjoy our beer.
Awesome. Thank you.